What kind of an attorney were you?
I had a civil justice practice, primarily auto accidents, police brutality cases, a few medical malpractice cases, a few workers' compensation cases. I help people fight insurance companies. David beat Goliath. That's kind of what my practice was about. Early in my practice, when I was in my 30s, I'm 70 now, I handled a case where a couple of kids were abused sexually by a Catholic priest. The case was so troubling to me, not just from the standpoint of a priest doing this to a couple of kids, but the way the church behaved in terms of transferring offenders, hiding witnesses, covering up prior incidents by the same priest, transferring him from place to place, doing despicable things to avoid the consequences. I said to myself way back then, 35 some years ago, I should write a book about this. And in about 2000, I would say, I sat down, I started to write a nonfiction account, an actual account of the way things went down. And it wasn't happening for me. It was almost like writing a legal brief, which I can tell you most people find pretty boring. So I decided to turn it into a novel, embellish it a bit, write it about the church rather than picking on a particular denomination, because I believe, frankly, that something like that can happen anywhere, but not the way the Catholic Church handles it, the way I described to you. Most people, like the Boy Scouts or other situations, finally come clean and do something about it. The Catholic Church for years has covered this up, transferred predators to communities who didn't know they were predators, and the cycle would begin all over again. So I had to write something about it. I promised myself as a bucket list item that I would. And finally, about 5 years ago, after I retired from practicing law, I wrote Betrayal of Faith, which is the first book in the legal thriller series you mentioned. And it is about a couple of kids who are abused sexually by a priest.
So why do you think they hid that for so long? Do you think it was because that was just the culture of the Catholic Church, like they were all doing it, so it was like, we'll just keep, it's our little secret and we'll just keep this thing rolling, or like what? I don't understand that.
Well, they were all doing it is an overstatement. I'm sure there are plenty of honest and terrific clergymen in the Catholic clergy. But there is this dirty little secret out there, and there was a cover up by various members of the hierarchy. I don't know how high it went. I don't know that popes were involved or anything like that. But I certainly know, for instance, at the local level, that archbishops were involved, and that those are the people who are responsible for transferring a priest from place to place. So when a priest, for instance, in my situation, is transferred from Wyandotte, Michigan to Farmington Hills, Michigan, the actual story, and 4 boys are molested in Wyandotte, but nobody tells Farmington Hills, and they go so far as to settle a personal injury case for those 4 boys, sealed by the court. Why the court is implicit in this kind of blows my mind. We can talk about that. They even get judges to participate in the cover-up. I don't think they do it realizing that's what they're doing. They're probably just trying to avoid unnecessary scandal, but that's what they're doing. They're enabling the predator to do it again, and that's what happened in Farmington Hills in my case. A priest who had molested 4 boys in Wyandotte molested 2 boys in Farmington Hills. And the cycle began all over again. From Farmington Hills, he was transferred to Cleveland. I wrote a letter to the Cleveland Plain Dealer basically laying out the facts of the case so that the citizens of Cleveland, wherever he went, whatever church he went to, would be aware that there was a predator in their midst. As a result of my letter, they transferred him to Baltimore, Maryland. You can't make this stuff up. Truth is better than fiction in this situation.
Yeah,
but that's what happened. I mean, that's what happened with this one priest. The good news at the very end of it all is Michigan now has an all-female, all-Democratic government. I'm not talking about the legislature, but the governor, the secretary of state, the attorney general are all female, and they're all Democrats. Well, I don't know what the politics of the show is, but a Democratic attorney general will not tolerate a predator priest. And this gentleman resurfaced in Illinois, I think it is. The attorney general got wind of some unresolved crimes that he committed in Michigan, and she went after him in his 70s or 80s, and he's now in prison thanks to her and thanks to the bravery of some people that came forward and said, let's get this guy off the streets. Now, prior to that, he was defrocked, finally, but that didn't take place until very much later in life. So that's the history lesson. The book is an embellished version of what I would say what the cover-up feels like. Here's this down and out lawyer. He has some characteristics of me. He has some characteristics of Paul Newman in The Verdict. he has some characteristics of lawyers I know. But when in his heyday, before he had a fall from grace, he handled a wrongful death case for the mother of these two kids. And he's the only lawyer she knows. So she contacts him, hires him. He pulls himself out of the gutter and takes on Goliath. And that's essentially what the book is about.